Welcome to Young and Finch, the podcast created by Korean millennials.
All right, guys, welcome to this week's podcast. This is going to be our finale for our season 2. We have a guest. Before that, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Andrew.
I'm Brian.
I'm Josh.
And our guest here, we'll just let him kind of do a full introduction. So, Jordan, welcome.
What's up, guys?
Welcome to the podcast.
I feel very welcome.
Yeah, this is our first time having a guest as well, so it'll be a new experience for us. So, Jordan, can you just, tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
So my name's Jordan Woods. I live in Toronto, Ontario. I'm originally from a really small town in New Brunswick called Quispamsis. And I'm happy to be here today.
Awesome.
Cool. So Jordan here is a big advocate of Korean culture, if I'm not mistaken, right? Can you vouch for me?
I can vouch for this. I frequently meet in front of government buildings just so I can advocate for the language.
What the? Yeah, but
He's got the poster up in front of the government building.
I'm dude with hunger sign. Sorry.
What?
I'm down.
Wow.
Wait, I think you should let everybody know that how you guys know Jordan. This is my first time meeting Jordan, except on TV.
And we'll get to that.
Dude,
later.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But you guys knew Jordan since university.
I knew him since university, so first year.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Bro, I met you in high school, Josh. Well, you were in high school. So Josh and I met through a mutual friend when he was in high school. I was in university. And we went to what was probably the worst movie I've ever seen in theaters. I won't name it
pretty bad.
in case we get in trouble. But yeah, and then we just became friends. And then later on, Josh came to visit me in university because I went to York, and he brought Andrew with him, and that's how I met Andrew.
Nice.
Yeah. Jordan is not Korean, for anyone wondering.
Accurate
But
statement.
he knows how to speak Korean really, really, really well.
I would take out maybe 2 of those reallys. Borderline 3.
True. Well, you're the best person that's not Korean that knows how to speak Korean that I know.
I'm also the only one. But thank you.
No, I know a lot of other non-Koreans.
Oh, really? Oh.
But anyways, yeah, no, thanks for taking the time. And
No, it was cool. I've never been on a podcast before, but I watch a lot of them,
Yeah.
so I thought it would be cool.
I guess before we dive into it, like Andrew said, Jordan's probably the most Canadian guy I know. At the same time, he's probably one of the most Korean guys I know. And you've had a pretty interesting experience and path, I guess, with learning about Korean culture and I guess learning and I guess becoming more not only involved but experienced with Korean people, Korean culture, and your time in Korea. Can you give the audience like a bit of background as to like how you got to that point or how you got to the point today and how you kind of got into learning Korean and what piqued you?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I grew up in a really, really small town in New Brunswick, and it was only 18,000 people, and I knew the same people my entire life. And everyone there was, I don't exaggerate, everyone there was white. And it's not even just that everyone's white, everyone is the same kind of white. So just English, French, Irish, that's it. So when it came to, like culture and the way people are and the traditions people have, everyone was pretty much exactly the same growing up. There was no difference. Like I could easily go to a friend's house and it would be pretty much exactly the same as my house, my family. And so it was just kind of like stale, I guess. And I'm kind of a quirky dude. And there were a lot of times where it just, something didn't click for me. And then when I was starting in grade 8 in middle school, Koreans started immigrating to my town, which in itself is like amazing because it's like the most small out of middle of nowhere place that you could possibly think of. And for anyone who's listening who's not in Canada, New Brunswick's like super small and there's like nobody there. So I just thought it was really kind of fascinating that we were getting immigrants from other countries. Like, how do you even know this town exists? And then so I was just kind of intrigued. And then I started, meeting Korean friends and making Korean friends. And then they slowly introduced me to, the food and the music and the culture and the language. And I don't know why, but it just kind of like clicked. It really resonated with like what my values were and how I thought and what I found interesting and what I was interested in. And so I just spent more time with my Korean friends and learned more. And I started really liking Korean food and started listening to the music more. And then I got to a point towards the end of high school where I want to learn the language. I don't want to just, listen to the music and not know what's going on, or hang out with Korean friends and not know what's going on. Because, keep in mind back then, the Koreans that I knew were not like you guys. Like, they were super, super fob and didn't speak English that well at that time. And so most of the time we were only speaking Korean when we were together. So when university came around, I knew I wanted to move to a big city, and I knew I wanted to go to business school. But what became clear to me was that I also wanted to go to a place where I could learn Korean in a study environment, in a classroom environment. And so that's why I moved to Toronto. I started taking Korean classes in university. That helped a lot. I met a lot of second-gen Korean friends here, which was, again, super interesting to me because before I moved to Toronto, I didn't even know what second-gen was. Like, at that point, I had never even met an Asian person who didn't speak without an accent. So, like, that was, like, fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And I think that actually helped a lot in my learning process because with second gens, it's more natural to flow back and forth between English and Korean.
Konglish.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's an easier way to kind of bridge the gap and learn quicker. And then, so I took Korean for a couple of years. And then in third year of uni, I went on exchange to Yonsei in Korea, which was probably the best 5 months of my life. It was lit. And I'm sure we can get more into that experience later on. But that obviously helped a lot in my learning process as well. And then when I got back, I think, and for the rest of my life up till now, I think I'm at a place where I'm pretty comfortable speaking. And I think I have a pretty, good grasp of how to carry myself in a Korean setting. And yeah, that's kind of how it all happened.
Nice. How many Koreans were in your neighborhood when you were growing up?
In my neighborhood, maybe like 5. In my school, so for context, my high school had about 1,200 students. I would say at the time there were probably about 50 Koreans.
Wow, that's actually a lot.
That's actually a lot.
Yeah, there was. I think what happened is once like a few people started immigrating there, they told their friends, and then a community started slowly building. And now there's like, a huge community of Koreans there. But it's interesting because you go there and there's literally 2 ethnic groups, the white people and the Koreans. There's no other immigrants there, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess for context, for anyone who might not be from Canada or aren't familiar with like the East Coast, it's called the Maritimes. But yeah, I think it's fair to say the Maritimes are still, it's like they're fairly like traditional and like it's not as
cosmopolitan, not as urban. There's not as much like international experience.
Yeah, like maybe at most at like Halifax or like some of the bigger cities, right? But other than that, you probably won't find too much diversity over on the East Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Yeah.
When you were choosing your school for university, did the Korean population of areas have an effect of the school you wanted to go to, or you just wanted to go to a big city?
So at the time, I didn't even realize in Toronto how big the Korean population was here. I just knew that it was Toronto, and I had obviously been here a bunch of times before, and I knew it was very diverse, but I didn't really know much about that. When it came to picking my schools, I knew I wanted to live in Toronto, so that was my first criteria. And then really there were only two universities in Toronto that had Korean courses. One was U of T and the other was York. And I mentioned that I went into business school. Both York and U of T have really, really good business schools. But to be honest with you, I chose York because they didn't require you to take calculus, and I hated math. So and also like another benefit was that like, you know, I grew up my entire life in a small town, and so like jumping right into downtown core from small town would have been, I think, a little bit of a shock. So York was easier because, you know, it's super north of the city, so it's quieter than it is downtown. I can still go downtown whenever I want, but I can also kind of escape that if I wanted to. So that's kind of, and also York's business school, Schulich, had a really, really strong exchange program. And I know I knew going into university that I wanted to go on exchange to Korea eventually. So that was a big factor as well.
You know, I heard somewhere that if you can hold a fork, you can go to York, but I don't know.
I don't think that applies to Schulich.
Schulikas, what's up?
Yeah, I heard somewhere that, no, I can't come up with a joke. Never mind. Go on.
I did hear some stories at York for sure.
Yeah, I think Schulich students also consider themselves different from York students, right?
It's actually the opposite in my experience. So like
interesting.
it's different because like at Schulich we had our own building, and the only classes we had outside that building were any required electives that we had to take. And we like were very aware that there's this reputation that like, you know, Schulich, you know, oh, they think they're better than us, and like, oh, they're these snooty rich kids.
But they are, sorry.
No, that's not true at all.
I'm joking.
In my experience, like we were fine with that, but like it was mostly York students who hated us or had these prejudice against us. And like in their defense, there were some, you know, there was some, like there were assholes at Schulich who were exactly like that, who were just like, you know, have 3 G-Wagons and like just throw money out like it's nothing, and did like think they were better, but like it was such a small percentage of the overall student population. So that part was kind of unfortunate. But honestly, I made a lot of friends at Schulich and I had a really good experience there. So no complaints.
I was curious, like when you were talking about your story, it's like when all those Korean immigrants came, like how did you guys like kindle? Because like typically, well, for me it's like it's a little bit awkward. Like if I came straight from Korea, I'd rather just hang out like with my own peer, like with my own Korean friends. Like how did you guys like reach out, and then how did you guys ultimately become good friends?
So initially, I think what helped was that at the very beginning there were only like a very small amount, like there were only like 2 or 3 who came, and so they didn't really have many people to, like there weren't other Koreans that they could hang out with, so they were kind of forced to integrate with the student population. So that was one aspect. So I think that made them more, I guess, open to forming relationships with us. I met my Korean friends initially through like school clubs, like band and things like that. And then also I'm just kind of, I mean, Andrew and Josh know I'm a pretty extroverted person, so I have no problem just like going up to people and talking, and I think all of those factors kind of contributed to it.
What was your first initial like thoughts when talking to someone someone that's first time you're seeing Asian, like your first time seeing Asians, right?
Wait, so that's your first time seeing a
No.
non-Caucasian person?
So I want to clarify. It's not that I hadn't seen Asians before or haven't met
like a celebrity
Asians
walking
before.
around.
No.
Yeah, kimchi, and this is like this is
No.
flavor.
And like it's like the town isn't just like this secluded little like, oh my god, outside our bubble the world is scary. It was more just like I had never been in an environment where like I see the same non-white person every day in a school setting. And so I mean it was just like interesting. It wasn't like weird or anything. I was just kind of interested in learning more. Although I have a bit of a cringe story to tell. So when I was first trying to introduce myself, I had no knowledge of the Korean language, culture, or anything. But there was this new student that came in middle school. I was in like grade 7. And to welcome them, the school had put up like this banner on the wall that had 안녕하세요 written on it. Or no, sorry, it was 어서 오세요. And then they wrote it in English, like the romanization under.
Also, Oseo.
But they wrote it like the proper romanization way. So it was like EO dash
Yeah.
SEO. Yeah. So I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to like read that, right? I didn't know how those sounds made. So I went up to one and I was like AO SEO Oseo.
I'm down.
And she was like, what? Like, oh, sorry.
Were there racists at school? Like people that weren't fond of non-white people?
I don't know that if it was a big problem, I never saw it.
Okay.
From the Koreans' perspective, they could have experienced it more than I could have. And I did see, I noticed comments here and there. They weren't like super, super nasty. It was more like just like...
was it about the eyes?
Yeah, like stuff like that.
Yeah,
Or like,
yeah.
or like...
Wait, that's pretty bad.
No, but it wasn't
You got
like...
that anywhere.
It's about positioning. It was like... I don't know, like they weren't doing it to attack them. It was more like, oh, they're just like stupid high school kids trying to look cool in front of their friends, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
most of the time, I would say people just kind of minded their own business. Because like, I will say that like in high school, the groups didn't really mingle with each other. Like at that point, by the time it got to high school, there was a pretty sizable Korean population. And, you know, aside from me, they mostly just hung out with themselves.
As Koreans do.
Yeah, there was some exceptions here and there, but mostly, you know, the white people hung out with their friends and the Koreans kind of kept to themselves.
So during your whole path of like learning about Korean food and Korean culture and stuff like that, I can imagine like, especially how like the timeline goes, like K-pop and the Korean entertainment scene and things like that didn't really pop off until you got to uni. So I guess what was that like for you to experience K-pop? I guess for you had more of an in because you were already connected with some Korean people. You already had some exposure. But even from your experience as a non-Korean, like what was your first like experience and kind of like reaction to K-pop, Korean entertainment shows, and like that whole subculture that started becoming like such a globalizing force more so recently, right?
Yeah. So living in Toronto, it's a bit different because when like global entertainment phenomena like that happen, big cities tend to experience it first. So like, yeah, back when I was in high school and I first started getting into K-pop, I still remember the first K-pop song I ever listened to. It was Don.
What was it?
It was Don Don by Super Junior. And
What?
Oh yeah.
Don Don.
Yeah.
It was like a rock concept, and anyway, I was like super into it. So for a long time, definitely all through high school and even into university, like it just wasn't a thing here at all. And so I just kind of enjoyed it on my own. I didn't really, you know, talk about it with anyone because, you know, none of my friends knew any Korean artists other than my Korean friends. And then I remember in first year uni, I took my first Korean language class, and there were like, it was filled with non-Koreans, but not just white people, like a whole bunch of different races. And then I remember, I can't remember how it came up, but we had a discussion in class with the prof one day. Keep in mind, this was like 2010. And we were talking about like Wonder Girls. And the prof was like, how do you guys even know who the Wonder Girls are? And we were all just like, oh, YouTube. And so like, keep in mind, like that whole YouTube revolution of like sharing of content, that was only 10 years ago that started to happen. And this is still very, very beginning stages. Like the vast majority of people still didn't know anything about K-pop. It was only like the people like me who were
Korea boost.
Yeah, exactly. who were into it. And then I remember the following year, I took another Korean class with a different Korean prof, and she She, I think, was a little bit more academically involved with the whole K-pop, like Hallyu and like things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a discussion about K-pop in that class. And she had a theory, and keep in mind, this was in 2011, 2012, that she had this theory, that she thought K-pop had peaked and it's going to decline and die out within 10 years from that point.
Ooh, little did she know.
Yeah, little did she know, right? And so I thought that was really interesting. But then through university, it started slowly, like my non-Korean friends would hear of an artist or a specific song here and there. I think what really kicked it all off, and this is probably going to be obvious to some listeners, is in 2012 when Gangnam Style came out. And then like everyone knew Gangnam Style. That may not have like gotten a huge following for K-pop, but at least like foreigners actually had some frame of reference to what it was. And I remember that year I went home to Quispamsis for the holidays, and I went to go visit one of my old teachers in high school. And I remember walking through the halls of my high school, and someone was playing Gangnam Style on their laptop. And I remember thinking like, holy shit, this is insane.
Crazy.
Yeah, this is so crazy. But at that point, it's still like, even after that, and I think even after Gangnam Style, it was like kind of a one-hit wonder. That didn't really lead to any big widespread K-pop phenomenon.
sure.
It was just kind of like a blip in the map. And then like slowly after that, like I remember when Taeyang came out with Wedding Dress, that was a big deal at school outside of my Korean friends. And there would slowly be these kind of like one-offs here and there where people would know what they're talking about. But honestly, it really wasn't until 2018 when BTS first performed on the Billboard Music Awards. That's, I think, like if you look at a timeline in history, that's like the kickoff point for what really kicked off how K-pop has gotten so big. And so to answer your initial question about what's it's been like for me, who's like been involved in this K-pop music culture
Journey,
for
yeah.
so long, and now like everybody knows BTS, everyone knows Blackpink, even Big Bang, maybe to a lesser extent on the masses. They're still widely
Good
known
times.
around the world.
Yeah.
It feels odd. Like I still get weirded out when I hear Dynamite by BTS playing on Virgin Radio, or like hearing it at a restaurant, or like all you walk around in cafes and random cafes that aren't Korean cafes will just be playing K-pop in general, not even just BTS, just like general K-pop. It makes me think like, holy shit, like this is like big now. And like you look at I think Twitter released their most tweeted musicians, like not Korean musicians, like musicians worldwide in 2020. Number one was BTS. Number two, I think, was Beyonce. Like BTS beat Beyonce. Like, what the hell? And then like number two was Kanye West, and number three was Beyonce. But then number five even was this group called ATEEZ, which is like a lot of, they're called ATEEZ. Yeah.
ATEEZ.
And like your reaction proves it all. Even a lot of Koreans would never have heard of
never heard of them.
ATEEZ before. And I was reading more about them, and apparently they're more popular internationally than they are in Korea. But like even that, like the fact that there's K-pop groups who are more popular internationally than they are in Korea is just like really interesting to me. So I'm curious to see how much bigger it's going to get.
Yeah, it must be kind of, I don't know what 뿌듯해 is in English.
Like you're proud.
Kind of proud, I guess proud, because you started following K-pop and Korean culture when it was small and not a lot of people noticed it, but now it's like huge and pretty much almost everyone knows. Like you kind of grew up and saw how it progressed.
Yeah. I don't know if proud is the right word. I feel like I think it's cool. The thing is, even though K-pop has gotten so big now, I think we're not at the peak yet, because like we're still not at a point where like in my general friend groups we would talk about K-pop groups in the same way that we would talk about the latest shit Kanye West has done, or the latest Drake release. But yeah, it's cool. And it's interesting, but it's also like it's a bit different now because back in high school I was baduri, like I was totally just into idols, and
Yeah.
that was it. And Josh knows because I used to talk and
All
play
day.
them all the time and talk about them all the time. And now that the world is just getting into idols, I'm kind of transitioned more now into like R&B and K hip hop more so than the traditional idols. So I'm curious to see if that's like the next step. Like our artists like Taeyeon T and Jiko and like Crush, like are they going to be the next kind of wave in the Korean wave after idols?
Yeah, that might be tough because there's so many good American or like international R&B. I think K-pop as a genre is specific to like of its own, right?
Yeah.
That's true, but I
But
also
we'll see.
think K R&B is very distinct from regular R&B. I and like this is my own personal opinion, but I find the production quality of KRMB is just higher in general than it is for general Hollywood R&B. But I
Yeah.
don't know. We'll see what happens.
Really.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure if it does get big then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a trend that you guys probably saw too, but one thing that I saw especially was as Korean pop music and the Korean music industry and stuff like that, like as that grew, I saw that more and more of the artists were taking more and more influence from current, like at the moment, like Western music styles, Western music trends, beats, the direction and stuff like that. Like, especially if we're talking back to like Big Bang and stuff, like as each album came out, they sounded a lot more and more in line with what was happening in terms of like North American pop. And I think that trend continued even with like, I mean, I think BTS is one of those cases where they're doing their own thing and they are distinct from like what we're hearing in other bands and genre groups or pop artists and stuff like that, even in America. But even things like hip hop and K hip hop, K R&B, like a lot of that I think takes like so much influence from the Western media that I don't know if like, people really realize to what extent. Like when Show Me the Money came out, everyone was biting just like every mainstream trap rapper. You know what I mean? Like everyone's sounding like a dollar store Lil Uzi Vert or some shit. You know what I mean?
You sound like a hater.
No, I'm just speaking facts, right? And like taking inspiration is good, right? And they, Koreans, I think I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I think Koreans take a lot of inspiration from other things and then make it better in their own way, right? Like even if you look at the coffee shop culture in Korea, like I don't think coffee originated in Korea.
No.
But Koreans took the idea and the feeling you get from coffee shops and cafes, and they really just like honed in on that. Like
It made it
you
way
can
more
speak-
expensive.
Yeah. But they made it more of like an experience, right? You don't just go for the coffee, you go to take pictures and chill and stuff like that. And that's like a thing you do. I think that's common in Korean like culture and things like pop culture especially.
You touched on a really important point about the influence that Western music culture has had on Korean music, and this is true of KRMB and K hip hop, but also K-pop in general. And I think that's actually a big reason why K-pop has become so big worldwide, because like if you look at Asian countries and East Asian countries, arguably Korea, I would say, is the country that has been most influenced by Western culture in general. Like you think about, I was watching YouTube the other day on one of my favorite YouTube channels, Asian Boss, where they were just going up to random Koreans in the street and saying like, can we have a conversation in pure Korean with no English words at all? And
Yeah.
when you're like put under that microscope, it makes you realize just how many words have been adopted from English into everyday Korean language. And so I think that influence in taking kind of Western elements of music and putting it into K-pop is what made it palatable to worldwide audiences. Because like if you look at the dollar value or the production value of like the Chinese music industry or the Japanese music industry, traditionally, and I think even now, they're still, in terms of dollar amount, bigger than the K-pop culture is. But because especially the Japanese music industry, they are still very, very within their own culture, and it's very the flavor is still very Japanese and incorporates minimal Western elements, it becomes less palatable for international audiences, I think. So I'm and like even if you look at like a lot of the most popular K-pop songs, or R&B songs, the actual producers and writers of those songs, not the lyrics, but the songs themselves, come from like Sweden or the UK. And so there's a lot of collaboration going on with Western producers as well. And I think that helps a lot to make it more globally appealing.
Yeah. To add on to that, AOMG has their own DJ, I think.
Yeah. I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
But he produces like pretty much all of Jay Park's music and
he's
the
not
other
from
artists.
Korea.
Yeah, no, he's American.
Yeah.
Even just like looking back to Gangnam Style, like the rhythm and the beat of the music, it's like it kind of reminded me of like the techno, like you know like that techno boom like vibes
2008,
back in 2010,
like
EDM, like kind of like that,
EDM,
that vibe.
like festival vibes.
Like it builds up, and then like boom.
Yeah,
That's kind of like what drew me in to Gangnam Style.
And that was what, 2012, right? That was like when Martin Garrix was dropping Animals. Like this is when a lot of Western and like not Western but global EDM artists. So like yeah, like it kind of rode that trend line along with like what other people were like.
But it did it the best
But it did it differently. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like inspiration, it's like there's similarities, but it's still different.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
They didn't just copy and paste Western music. They took elements of it and made it into something new that was their own. And I think that's why it's become so popular.
Yeah, and I completely agree with the whole Korea is, I think, one of the like top countries that takes Western influences. I agree with that.
And it's like not even just in popular culture, you know, their political system.
Yeah, exactly.
Even like modern architecture. It's all aspects of life. Even like I would, you know, one thing about Korean culture, and we may talk about this later on, is, you know, the whole hierarchy and the way you have to speak to people depending on their status and their age relative to you. If you look at colloquial Korean language today versus 50 years ago, I would argue that it's become a lot more comfortable, even in the context of Korean culture. Like, you know, you go back to 50 years ago, you would argue that it would be very, very rare, for example, to find children who would speak to their parents informally. And now it's become a lot more common, I would say. I mean, it's not like it's not like cut and dry, like 100% over, but it's become more relaxed than I think it was for like your grandparents. And I think that comes as a direct influence from Western culture.
Yeah, and I think Korea respects, especially like the States, in terms of just like everything. I would say actually.
Totally. Like for the listeners who aren't familiar with the Korean language, even the Korean word for the United States, 미국, translated means beautiful country.
Like I didn't know that, but I'm down.
Oh, really?
Yo, Jordan's more Korean than all of us did.
한국 is united.
Yeah.
Country. I know that.
But I think Jordan probably knows
He's
I
more
think
Korean
more
than all three of
historically
us.
than honestly, because like I don't research.
Yeah,
I
me
neither.
didn't learn about Korea formally. I just grew up with the culture. Same with
Right.
like people who learn English speak more proper English than like native English speakers because they learn it
In a classroom
normally,
setting.
right? Exactly.
You learn like
They learn
not
about,
just like that things are the way they are. You learn why they are the way they are, and you apply that to like new instances of like grammar and other words and finding root words and stuff. So yeah,
like it's fascinating to me how like involved you are in the Korean culture, like Korean music and things like that, and like coming back to the beginning, like you were just a Caucasian kid growing up in a small town, and like what drew you in when you first initially met that Korean friend or whatever. Like what was it about them that, you know, oh, this is different, like this is interesting, like this is something that I want to keep learning and keep developing, and like here you are now.
yeah. So I think what initially drew me in was just the fact that it was like different and it was something that intrigued me. But like what kept me interested and like made me want to like kind of delve deeper is that I think it just like came down to values. I appreciated that, you know, Korea is not so individualist. Like it's not like, oh, I'm more important than everyone around me. It's like, you live your life in a way that minimizes your negative impact to other people. And then I found the concept of friendship in Korea to be different than it was in Canada. Not to say that it was better or worse, but it was just different in terms of like, it's very easy in Western culture to have, surface level friendships, and like you meet up with people and you have fun. But like if you ever like needed money, or if you needed like a ride at 3 a.m. because you were in an emergency or something, like I just found that the connection that I had with my Korean friends seemed to be deeper. And they were more willing, like, once you're in, like, no questions asked. If you need help, I'm there. And again, that's not to say that that doesn't exist in Western culture.
I was just gonna say, maybe your Western friends were just
no, and I want to be like all my Western friends too. Like they're still really good friends, and I still keep in contact with them. Like even friends from high school to this day. But like in Korean, there's this concept called 정 that doesn't really, I think, exist in Western culture, and I don't really know how to translate it. I guess the closest would
Affection?
be like closeness.
Yeah.
tongue is one of those words. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's so much.
Yeah, and I don't know. It just it seemed more meaningful to me. Like even like a lot of Korean families will send their children abroad because they want them to learn English or have a Western education or something like that.
Right.
And they'll have friends who will just let their kids live with them, and like that's just that's how it works. It's not a massive burden. It's just kind of like an expectation that, I need your help and you'll help me. Even the concept of sending your children abroad without the parents for an extended period of time for an education, not that it doesn't exist here, because it definitely does, but at least within the context of like my small town, that was such a foreign concept to me. I could never imagine like growing up without my parents, or my parents sending me somewhere, or the dad letting the mom move with the kids to another country while the dad stays behind to earn money to help that family. Like that's just so uncommon here compared to Korea that I think, but it's not seen as out of the ordinary or burdensome. It's just like something you do to help the people you love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an expectation. It's a facet of life. And so that I think would just be an example of how like, the I guess closeness of relationships. It's not as easy to cut people out or to forget people in Korea as it is, in my experience, in Western culture. And so because, I value my relationships in that way, I think it got me, it just made kind of that aspect of Korean culture resonate more with me.
Just made sense.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because I guess being a Korean person, you don't think about that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not actively thinking about how
good of a friend you are.
or how connected I am with people. It's just like, it's just intuitive for us, but it's interesting to hear that from like a third person's perspective. I guess kind of bring it back to not K-pop, but as Korea culture as like more like a common part of modern day pop culture, I guess. Like not only, I think K-pop was the force that opened the door, but what followed through and what we're seeing recently is like the stream of Korean media, whether that be entertainment shows, movies, or Korean dramas, right? And also like, also seen in like YouTube and things like that, right? I think a lot of things we're seeing now are, Korean things being trendy, not only in Asian countries, but in Western countries. And just to touch on the K-pop wave and things like that, K-pop was always huge in Asia. Like it's been huge for so long, especially Southeast Asia and China and the neighboring countries. Like a lot of those other Asian countries we're very exposed to K-pop and Korean dramas and things like that. But it's only recently in the past like 5 years that it's really hitting the Western hemisphere. But yeah, I want to kind of open that up a little bit, because I think we're seeing a very interesting wave where like Korean culture, things that are like Korean are just becoming trendy, and like they have like a different impact when they hit like our world. You know what I mean?
No, what are you trying to say?
Korean stuff is getting cool.
Yeah, like I mean, think about like how big of an impact mukbang had on YouTube videos, right?
Right.
And we touched on this before, but like the idea of mukbang in Korea was like people just did that in like small private Discord rooms for at like 12 till like 7 in the morning, right? It was like kind of like not very mainstream, but now it's like if you don't do that as part of a vlog, it's like it's not common, you know what I mean?
Yeah, even to add to your point, you know how you just mentioned internet broadcasting?
Yeah.
Like Korea had their own thing before Twitch, right?
Yeah,
it was called
100%.
Africa,
Yeah.
but they say it Africa. Yeah, and like they had their own Facebook before. It was like World.
Yeah.
So I think, like you said, we like the Korean culture had everything, but just adapting to what the West, because right now, like I think Koreans use Facebook now, but they still have KakaoTalk, right, which is their own messaging platform, right? So like even like kind of going back to the integration of Western culture in Korean society, like you could see it there as well, right? So
Yeah, like in a way, we always had those tools on hand. It's just different tools now.
Yeah, I guess Koreans just use what's the most popular. So like Korean K-pop is the most popular in the world, so it's like they're gonna push that.
I think there was like many different factors. Like number one, like Korean culture, like Korean music and Korean drama and all those things like adapted to the Western society. And then there was also like the development of like YouTube, Instagram, and just being able to like see these clips like available at hand, you know, just go on your phone, you're scrolling and you see all these things. And I think there was just like tons more exposure.
That's true.
That just got out to
Yeah.
people.
You get like, you know, now on Netflix, there's so many dramas on Netflix and they get pushed to you. And Netflix, I think, just announced they have like this massive content production budget specifically for Korean dramas in 2021. And, you know, all Korean music is on Spotify. It's all on Apple Music.
To that, actually, there's an article where Spotify took out all K-pop music. So I don't know if you saw it.
What?
There were some technical
When?
issues.
There was like 3-4 days ago. Yeah.
They might have fixed it. I don't know, but there was
I
like
still
a
have
blip
it.
where they deleted everything, or like
No.
Yeah, there's a
like KakaoTalk like had the rights or something,
Yeah.
or some shit.
Oh,
like
was that what it was?
when
Kakao?
Spotify joined Korea,
Yeah.
KakaoTalk said no, like that's
Oh,
not
yeah,
cool.
in Korea. Sorry, I thought you meant worldwide. Spotify didn't have Korean music. I was like,
For a bit, I think they pulled Korean music for a bit. I don't know if it's back now though. You gotta fact check us on that.
yeah, I was gonna say, because I know Spotify wasn't available in Korea. Like Koreans couldn't download it until recently, like a couple months ago.
Yeah, there's this. It was on Subtle Asian Traits. Like, there's so many posts about Spotify taking away Korean music, but like memes about it. But anyways,
On the topic of mukbang, I actually wanted to, because I think what's interesting is whenever I introduce Korean food to non-Korean people, they have a hard time with the same things, and they have an easy time with the same things. Like if you give them bibimbap
yeah,
or Korean barbecue, oh my god, bro, I love Korean food. And they give them 된장찌개 or kimchi, they're like, I don't think Korean food's for me, bro. So for you, from your experience, and I guess this is kind of drifting away from like the pop culture, but like I'm kind of curious to know what your experience was like with Korean food specifically.
I kind of just loved it immediately.
Really?
I don't know why. I definitely get your point about like certain foods being widely
Funky.
liked and
Yeah.
others being widely like hit or miss.
Yeah.
I think it just those foods tend to have like really strong flavors that are uncommon in Western environments, like doenjang, which for audience is like soybean paste.
Fermented.
And,
Yeah.
fermented soybean paste, and like kimchi, which is also fermented. Oh, maybe that's the trend.
Yeah, I think so.
but like pickles are fermented too. So like, yeah, I like it could also just be because I literally like everything. Like there's no food I don't like. So maybe I just had an easier time adapting. I will say the first time I ever tried kimchi, I cried.
Of happiness or of sadness?
No, of spiciness. Like I couldn't handle it. And it was just
white, huh?
Yeah, no, it was bad. Like I had tears in my eyes. I had never tasted anything that spicy before. You know, growing up eating meat and potatoes and fish and like very bland, not strong flavors. But like now it's not spicy at all. But I can definitely get like, you know, when I graduated university, that summer before I started working, I went back to Korea for 2 months. And while I was there, my mom actually flew out and came to experience it with me. Because, you know, I was like, her son had been interested in Korean culture for so long. So I was like, well, why don't you come over and I'll like show you what it's about.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And I was actually really, really surprised. Anytime I took her out to eat, she always tried everything and she really liked everything. The only thing she couldn't handle was kimchi. And to this day, she can't handle it. It's just like it's a strong food. It's a strong taste.
It's a hit or miss.
Strong smell. Like for Korean for non-Korean audiences, like people in Korea have separate fridges just for kimchi in their house.
Sir. Which we don't use that for kimchi.
But
what do you use it for?
Yeah,
extra storage.
Really?
Well,
I use it for kimchi.
I feel like that's a Josh thing, not a Korean
I
thing.
don't know, I feel like that's pretty common. You always open the kimchi fridge and it's like filled with other frozen shit.
I've never seen
Not
that.
true.
No, I'm not looking at it.
But like I get it because like, you know, it smells really strong, and like if you put it in a fridge with other food, it affects the smell of everything else. And like, so I get it. But it was just like, you know, in a hit or miss environment, it was a hit for me.
The real question is, do you have a kimchi in your fridge right now?
Yeah, my roommate is Korean, and his grandmother lives close to Toronto, and she makes us kimchi all the time,
word?
and it's
Damn,
really
so you
lit.
got that good
That's
shit.
blessed.
And like so for people who are listening who aren't familiar, there's a bunch of different kinds of kimchi, and my favorite kind is shin kimchi, which is like sour kimchi.
Yeah.
And that's the kind she always makes, and it's like the best in the world. I'm so happy that she does that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think with kimchi too, it's like there's, you know, like you said, there's different stages of it too. Like shingo is like, that just means it's been fermented for so long that the impact and the chok you get in your nose, it's like it hits different. So like if you're like a newbie and you have shingimchi, like you'll pass out or you'll cry like you did, right? But if you have like the more milder like fresh kimchi, then it's like, you know, it's more manageable. It's less funky.
Yeah, I don't understand people that like pickles but don't like the idea of kimchi.
I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't like the idea of kimchi.
Oh, not the idea, because like like personally, when I think about people that don't like Asian fermented foods but like pickles, is I feel like the word fermented is used a lot in the Asian like types of dishes,
Food,
but
yeah.
it's brined for pickles. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like it's worded differently.
People don't. Well, so I think there's a couple of things. First of all, Western people like grow up from childhood knowing what pickles are, and maybe they don't like them, maybe they do, but they've been introduced to them from an extremely young age. Secondly, pickles are really sweet. They have a lot of sugar in them. And most fermented foods, at least in Korean food, aren't overly sweet. They're usually sour or spicy. And then the third thing I would say is that people don't think of pickles, at least younger people don't think of pickles as fermented, to your point. They're just pickles. They're in pickle juice. They're pickled. They're not fermented. And you know, you learn in school in science class that fermentation is when like the yeast breaks down and like, you know, I don't know that. I'm not a scientist.
I didn't know that either, but
혹시 science
please
professor,
don't
Mr.
accept
Woods?
that as fact. I could have completely made that shit up, but like there's some kind of biological thing that happens. And you think about it that way, and a lot of people, and there's some foods when they like ferment, they become, you know, bad, like you can't eat them anymore. So I think that's where, to your point, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like the word fermented just the word itself, I think can, I guess, deter people from wanting to try it.
But it's also the ingredients, right? Like you put 새우젓 in kimchi, which is
Yeah.
inherently fishy. I
Yeah.
think that's a palate that's also not common in Western.
새우젓, for listeners, is like a fermented shrimp paste.
Yeah. Which is common in Korean culture, but you also see that all across like Thai food,
Vietnamese
Chinese food, you know. And that's like a common kind of like fishy umami flavor that we're used to, but isn't common here, right?
But you should get used to it because it's real good.
I think what people are realizing with Korean food is that the fact that it's fermented, like we mentioned, right? Like Korean food is actually fairly healthy. Like it's fairly balanced and there's a lot of vegetables, right?
Kimchi
There's
was
not too much
ranked like
sugar.
one of the healthiest foods in the world.
Yeah, I'd say it's very balanced. And things like kimchi and stuff, like, yeah, there's salt and yeah, there's sugar in it, but it's a lot of that fermentation results in a lot of like good bacteria, like probiotics and things like that, right?
A lot of vitamins.
Exactly. So these, you know, like there's a lot of things in Korean cuisine that I think is starting to become seen in a positive light, where it's like it's like a health food. It's like, let's eat something good today. Like, what do you want to eat? Like, I want to eat something new. What about like, you know, Japanese or sushi? Like, let's try Korean food, you know? I don't know. That might just be me.
Actually, just going off topic, like going back to the beginning, Jordan, I actually saw you on Netflix, I guess. But it was called Homecoming, and Jordan's actually, he knows this Korean celebrity called Henry. I'm sure a lot of people knows. And I guess Jordan was over at his house, and anyways, it's getting off topic. That's where I first saw Jordan.
I can't believe you remember that. I was literally on
Yeah.
for 30 seconds in one scene, and that episode was recorded now 6 years ago. So that's insane that you remember that.
Every time I see like a non-Korean dude and a Korean dude, like in a Korean show, like people are gonna remember you.
Okay, fair enough.
What was the premise of that show again?
So there's a really popular show in Korea called 비정상회담, which I think
Yeah.
in English is called Abnormal Summit.
Summit.
And
yeah.
for anyone listening who doesn't know, it's a show where they get a bunch of foreigners who are living in Korea and speak Korean really fluently, all together at a table with some hosts, and they talk about like just general topics like social issues, political things, and then
Yeah.
all of the panelists talk about like how their country on an overall basis would interpret that issue, or what the prevailing view of that issue is in their country. And so
Interesting.
the Homecoming, which in Korean is called 내 친구의 집은 어딘가, was a spin-off of that show where they each episode follows one of those panelists back to their home country to just kind of like learn about how they grew up and what their country is like and stuff. And so Henry wasn't normally a panelist on that show, but I think he had guested a couple of times, and so they did an episode where he came back to Toronto, and they all of the members of the 비정상회담 panel came with him, and they just did an episode at Henry's house. And how I actually came to be on that show was that Henry's brother, who at the time I worked with, one day he was like, "Yo, do you want to come over after work today?" And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So I came over, and
Casual.
I came over, and there was this massive motor coach in front of his house, and like a bunch of like camera equipment all over the front lawn, and a bunch of people going in and out. And I was like, "What's going on?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna be on TV." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
No heads up, no warning.
Yeah. I was caught really off guard. I was super awkward. I'm actually really thankful because the way they edited it didn't make me seem like a total weirdo. But we filmed one scene in the living room, and then after that they were like, "Oh, I think you're done." I'm like, "Yeah, I think
really?
I'm done too."
Damn.
Yeah, and then they filmed the rest of the episode without me because I was just really awkward on screen. Which, like, respect, I totally was awkward. But it was still a cool experience. It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually saw Henry too in Finch Station,
Yeah.
and it was
Really?
at night, and there was no one except me and him kind of crossing our paths.
Yeah.
And then you know that reaction when you know you saw someone
Yeah.
and then you don't know where.
Yeah.
So in a split second I had that. I was like, "Oh shit, that's Henry, right?" But I think he saw me have that expression of like, "Wow," or like that all moment, and then he acted like like when he saw me, he's like, oh, like this guy's gonna ask for like a picture or signature. Like he had that face, right, of welcoming, like I'm a star, like you gotta
He
ask
was
me
like-
for some shit. So I was like, yo. And then the next split second for me, I was like, yo, fuck that. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see him, and I just walked past him. And then I don't know, on my peripherals, he was kind of like, he was caught off guard too, right? Because he was I feel like he was expecting people to like ask him for
He's got to be so used to it by now, right?
yeah.
Like,
But I mean, I don't really care about Henry, to be honest. It's just I thought it was funny.
Wow. People are gonna
I
start
don't know.
Oh.
unfollowing our podcast now.
I mean, I don't know him, so I don't.
Yeah.
Why should I?
I want to be clear though, like I'm not boys with Henry. I met him
Yeah,
a couple
yeah.
times, and like I don't
Yeah,
even
yeah,
know
yeah.
if he would remember my name. I keep in contact with his brother. One thing I will say though is that like Henry's like how you see him on TV, like he's acting like, you know, kind of UTA and like funny and making jokes all the time. That's exactly how he is in real life when the cameras aren't on. So I thought that was really cool because he's not different at
right.
all. He's just like
Yeah.
a quirky kind of fun
Yeah.
dude.
He's genuine.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a genuine dude. Yeah.
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 That's actually interesting, but that's not your only time you were on Korean national television, right? I believe there were other instances. Can we highlight those instances? This happened. What was it? It was like 20. Is when you went to Korea. Jog my memory. I think this is like 2014 or
2013.
2013.
Yeah, in 2013, I was on exchange at the time, and for fun, and also because my friends did it without me knowing, I auditioned for Superstar K. And-
What?
Yeah, and I made it on one of the episodes.
Oh shit.
Yeah,
I tried to find that clip, but I couldn't find it.
I had
yeah,
it
it's
saved.
buried deep in the internet, and I will
Yeah, I
never
had
share
it.
it.
I had it bookmarked 4 computers ago, so it's long gone now.
Yeah,
So did you actually like perform in front of the judges?
yeah. So for people who may not know like how audition shows actually work in the background, because they're like what you see on TV is very different from like what actually
Yeah.
happens. So you like, you know how when they have those helicopter shots of like thousands of people waiting in line to audition, they don't all see the judges. There's like a team army of producers who like listen to all the auditions, and they kind of like pick who they want to like actually be auditioning for the judges based on you know, whether or not they have like, if they stand out, if they're like weird, or if they're like a genuinely amazing singer, or if they're like genuinely a really awful singer, like just people who will make good TV.
yeah.
Yeah.
Show that's so savage though to people that
But they have to.
don't
Yeah.
don't sing well.
Do it for the ratings. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
they,
I know.
they have
Because
to.
they don't want anyone plain, right? They don't want any
Yeah,
average.
exactly.
You see those clips on American Idols where they're like just horrible.
Yeah.
Just roasting the shit
Yeah.
out of the guy.
They want like little Timo from Show Me the Money, you know? Like, yeah.
What do you mean? She was sick. I loved her.
But yeah, so how it works is you have to go through like 2 or 3 of those like producer auditions before you make it or don't make it to like the judge auditions. But at the time, I think they wanted, like back in 2013, there weren't that many foreigners on TV. Now there are. There were a few, but not that many. And so they actually came to Yonsei campus to hold auditions specifically for foreigners. And because they wanted foreigners on the show, if you passed that initial producer audition there, you went straight through to the judge auditions. You didn't have to go to 2 or 3 more. And so my friends, as a joke, filled out the paperwork and submitted it without me knowing. And then they got like my name sticker back, and they were like, "Hey, you're auditioning for Superstar K today." I'm like, "All right, great." So I did that audition, and I think it was more so just because I was white and spoke Korean that they pushed me through. I passed the producer audition and then made it to the judge audition. The day of my judge audition, you're there all day, but they're only seeing like 10 people. And the reason for that is because like they have to take all this B-roll footage where they'll literally be like, okay, walk past these flowers with your friends and pretend you're talking, or like walk into the show, or like if you're walking too fast or they don't like the way you look, they make you retake it. So all those natural shots are all
Yeah.
completely produced. And then
Mm.
it came up to my just before my turn to actually audition for the judges. At the time, the judges were Chogwon from 2AM.
Oh yeah.
Yo, that guy fell off. Holy shit. Anyways.
Isunchar, and there's like this harmony kazu called Hyunmi.
Should like tell me about? Sorry.
30. But anyway, those were the 3 celebrity judges. And before I went on, the producers actually laid out for me how the audition would go. They told me what to do. So they told me to go in and speak English and don't let on that I speak Korean, and
Sophie.
audition with an English song. So I sang You Raise Me Up by Josh Groban.
Classic.
And then they said, okay, after you sing the English song, the judges are going to ask you if you can sing something in Korean. And then you should do that. And so I said, okay. And then I sang Oma by Radi, which is kind of a lesser known song, but it's like a ballad. And I really like that song. And then afterwards, that's when they told me to start speaking Korean so that I could like surprise the judges and they would be like, all like, oh, damn, like da da da.
Wait, so the judges knew that you spoke Korean though?
I don't know if they knew or not. They acted surprised when I spoke Korean afterwards. I don't know if they were given the heads up.
I have a feeling it might be fabricated.
It could be, like they could have been given the heads up, but I don't know that.
What was your initial thought when they reacted to your
The reaction
Korean?
seemed genuine.
Genuine? Okay.
And then, like, after I auditioned, they asked me if I knew who any of them were. And I said, well, I know Chogwon. And they said, oh, can you sing a 2AM song? None of this ended up on the episode, by the way. This is just, like, what they asked me to do. And then I was like, oh, I know 죽어도 못 보내 by 2AM.
Yeah.
And then they were like, can you sing it? And I'm like, oh, I don't know the lyrics. And then they're like, okay, well, Chogwon, you sing it, and then you can follow Chogwon. So then Chogwon and I sang it together.
Yo, that's dope.
Nice.
That's it.
That should have been on the episode.
No,
Yeah.
it was like, it was awkward. But then, yeah, and then they were like, oh, like, yeah, I don't think this is the right show for you. And I'm like, true, I get it. It's all good. And then afterwards, like, they had, like, there was a camera in front of me and they were like, make sure you walk slow because the cameraman can't walk back too fast and, like, you know, talk about, like, how sad you are or disappointed you are. And then they made me go into, like, this other, it was almost like a photo booth with a video camera. And they were like, can you, like, say thank you to anyone who helped you get this far?
You're like, fuck that, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, this is all good.
Yeah, but
But-
good for you for going, man. Because like
It was a cool
your
experience.
friends set you up, but damn, good for you for
Yeah.
following through.
It was fun. It was a cool, and now I have a story to tell. So like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't regret
Yeah.
it at all. It was
One
a,
hell
it
of
was
a
a fun
story.
time.
Yeah.
One hell of a story. But the funny thing is, when I saw it, it was like none of that was included.
Yeah.
It was literally like you see Jordan walking on stage, and then the audience is like, "Huh?" And then it cuts to him singing. He's like, and then you see the harmony's reaction, and that's it. It goes doing, and then it's the next person.
No, I remember when he spoke English first, and then the judges were like, "Can you speak Korean or something like that?" And then it cut to him singing "Oma." And I was
Wait,
like,
is
what
that how it
the-
went? I don't remember.
Yeah,
It's been so
yeah,
long.
yeah.
We need to find that clip.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I mean, we don't necessarily need to find that clip.
If anyone can find it and DM us, we'll send you a sticker.
Motivation out of 10.
I kind of just want to see it for myself though.
Yeah. No, it was cool though.
Yeah.
That's dope.
Sweet. Anything else? I think we're probably okay to start wrapping things up.
Yeah, I
yeah,
have my questions.
yeah. Let's,
If you guys don't have
let's give
anything,
Andrew
the
a
last
break.
thing I want to do before we close out is just a quick lightning round of fire questions for you guys.
Yeah, that's dope.
Just like, this or this kind of thing. All right.
Yes,
So
sir.
I'll ask the questions. You guys answer. So Jordan, being from the Maritimes, which would you rather have? Lobster dinner or chogeguy? Chogeguy, for those who don't know, is like grilled shellfish. It's like KBBQ with like seafood. It's really good.
I gotta go with lobster.
Lobster.
Yeah.
Brian?
Gui for me.
And Andrew?
Lobster.
What? True.
Lobster's lit, man.
Yeah.
Next question. Blackpink or BTS?
Blackpink.
Blackpink.
Blackpink, easy.
I'll go BTS, but
I mean, if I was a girl, maybe BTS.
Alright.
I love BTS too, but Jenny's my girl.
I love
Dirty.
Blackpink more.
Jenny Stan. Alright, your go-to 노래방 karaoke song. Off the top, boom.
지금이 순간 from Jekyll and Hyde the musical.
Ooh.
Oh,
Brian?
Scientist Coldplay.
Oh. Andrew?
Go Back by Dynamic Duo.
Oh, okay.
Yo, we reaching. Once this lockdown ends, I'm down.
I'm down.
Samsung or Apple?
Apple.
Apple.
Apple. Easy.
All right, I'm the only
Sorry, Josh.
Korean supporter here.
Hold this L, bro.
All right. 20 shots of soju or 5 shots of vodka?
5 shots of vodka, because then it would be over faster.
It's true. I go 20 shots.
That's hard
20
though.
shots.
Both suck.
I go 20 shots because you didn't clarify the different types of
Just
like
soju.
time and like you could
True,
you
yeah,
could
yeah.
eat stuff with it. So I would go with 20 shots of soju.
Dirty. Andrew always finding loopholes. You didn't specify the time duration.
And that's the way of life, bro. Sorry.
Nice.
All right, guys. Sorry.
Jordan, do you want to say anything? I don't know. Last closing thoughts or anything?
Yeah, no, just thanks for having me. Hope I offered a different perspective. Everything I said was an opinion. Please don't accept it as fact. And yeah, it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice getting a third person's perspective in Korean culture and I guess Korean society and things like that. Things that we as Korean people, Korean Canadians can overlook sometimes, but it's really refreshing to get a new perspective.
Yeah, like the part where Jordan thought friendship aspect that actually was very new to me. Right.
Yeah.
So I hope like our listeners got something out of this podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys want to look more into Jordan, we'll plug his Instagram in the comments if he wants, or any other social media platforms that, you know, you want to provide. Yeah.
And yeah, that's it. And we're going to wrap it up for this week, guys. Hope you guys have a fantastic week. The weather is supposed to get nicer. Seems like the lockdown is getting lifted, but we'll have to see.
Yeah. We should also let them know that we're going to be off for a few weeks we talked about this briefly last week, but we're just going to take some time off just to recuperate, you know, organize some thoughts and just get ready for season 3, I guess.
Yeah, thanks again, guys, for the big push. We saw a lot of growth and a lot of support for the past season, and we had a lot of fun making it, and I think we have a lot more planned in the future, so please stay tuned, and we'll be back shortly.
Yep, keep the DMs coming, guys, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Peace.
Yeah, because I was talking away from it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Is Momo okay?
Yeah, she's
She's eating.
she has snot in her throat.
Snotty girly네.
No.
But so she was like trying to, cut
Yeah.
that shit out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
아주머네.
Yeah.
She's a old grandma dog. Sorry.